I then asked myself, what is sleep? I began to investigate sleep. When one thinks, what have I got to do with these objects of the world? Let me rest in utter peace for some time. Sleep arises. Just as in the same body, there are sentient and also insentient parts, like nails and hair. Sleep is characterised by both sentience and insentience. Let me rest in peace. When this one notion prevails in the mind, there is sleep. This can arise even in the waking state. Perhaps that last sentence is referring to a daydream. The whole issue of sleep is worth looking into as part of one's self-inquiry. Sleep and dream. Who are we in our dream? Do we have free will in our dream? How much control do we have? It's quite possible we're somebody completely different in our dream. We could be a child, an old person, or an animal. We somehow know it's us, but our behaviour might be quite different. Perhaps we murder somebody. Perhaps we engage in some kind of sexual practice which is quite alien to our usual self. But for some reason we still think of it as us, don't we? As ourself. So just as with our physical body, which seems to have its own kind of life, it's getting on with everything by itself, growing, digestion, we seem to have some kind of control, don't we? We can decide to move somewhere. And it's the same with dreams. No matter how strange or bizarre the situation, there seems to be some course of action available to us which we regard as ourself. Then I began to investigate the state of Turiya, the fourth state. If one is established in Turiya, the world appearance ceases on account of perfect illumination. This is enlightenment. This is when consciousness rests in its own nature. The attention is attending to itself. The world appearance doesn't really cease. What ceases is our belief in its objective reality, our conviction in it. We're no longer convicted by it. Then the world exists as it is. Nothing ceases to be. It is because of the existence of this Turiya that waking, dream and sleep exist as they do. The realization that the world has not been created at all, since there is no cause for it to arise, and that it is Brahman alone that shines as the world, is Turiya. This is when you're with what is happening and not making any stories about it, or not identifying with any stories about it. The sage continued. Then a desire to become one with the consciousness of that being. So this is the moving out into creation. When I left that being's ojas, this is where the sage was centered, in the center of vitality. In order to enter into the consciousness, my own senses were immediately awakened. However, I restrained them at once and entered into the consciousness. As I entered that consciousness, I experienced two worlds at the same time. Everything appeared double. However, since the two perceiving intelligences were similar, the duality appeared to be similar and mixed well, like water and milk. And this is the sort of thing I just mentioned when you're in a dream and you're a completely different person, but somehow you're functioning. You'll have memories in that dream. You'll have friends in that dream. Nothing to do with your friends in your waking state. But somehow you're still operating as yourself. So it's quite an interesting breakdown of the phenomenon of being in a dream body. In a moment I drew into myself the consciousness of that other being with the help of my consciousness. At once the two worlds merged into one, even as for one who is suffering from diplopia, the perception of two moons gives way to the perception of a single moon when he is cured. It might seem strange and disorientating at first, but it all comes into focus and we go along with it. We go along with the dream. I had not abandoned my own wisdom, but my own thought form had greatly weakened and taken on the thought form of the other being. Hence I began to experience the world as he did. After some time he retired to sleep. He collected the rays of his mind. Even as a tortoise draws its limbs into itself, his senses were drawn into his heart along with their functions. His sense organs became as if they were dead, or as if they were but painted images. I was within him, and I followed the course of his mind and entered into his heart. For a moment I enjoyed the happiness of sleep, having abandoned the experience of external objects, and having entered into the ojas. And it seems that when you go into this ojas, you become aware of all the channels of the life force within the body. All the channels within him were dense and congested on account of fatigue and on account of food, drink, etc. The life breath flowed slowly through the nostrils. This is what happens when you're asleep. The life force turns upon its own source within the heart and relieves the mind of materiality, because naturally it is its own object. It's natural for the mind to rest in itself, but it's continually drawn out into concretizing notions of the world. The self is its own object now, and there is no other externalizing activity. Hence it shines in itself as itself. This is what it's doing in a dream, this is what it's doing in the waking state, and this is what it's doing in liberation.